Hello, friends. Back again, a little bit later today than usual, but still here for another episode of the Metal Blade Live series. Joined this week by Ben Umanov of Metal Sucks. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. A fan of obviously your work in Legion
Thanks, man.
and Metal Blade and this show. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, dude. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm a big fan of some of the bands you manage, as well as your work with Metal Sucks. So I'm
Some of them, not
stoked.
all of them.
Some of them. There's yeah, really everyone but Rivers of Nile. I hate them all. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah, they
kidding.
suck.
Uh, but no, man, I'm glad to have you here. I'm trying to remember the last time that I saw you in person, and I want to say that it was at the little post Dime Bash barbecue thing at Nam, like
Yeah,
right
that
before.
had to have been, yeah. So I mean
Uh,
that like makes you one of the last people I saw
yeah.
in real life. Yeah, that was a fun night. That was the Dave Grohl barbecue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I still
yeah.
have that guitar pick around here somewhere that it has like the dime bag with the flying V silhouette, and then it has like the Dave Grohl barbecue thing
Oh, that's
emblazoned on the other
awesome.
side.
I
It's
feel
it's
like I
super
ended
sick.
up with one of those too. But like everything, I don't know. It's just like the whole last year is a blur,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I mean, that was one of the last real events I think we all went to, though. I mean, like the
Yeah.
NAMM show in general.
Yep.
It's wild to think we were all just walking around the convention center with no idea.
Yeah. Right. There were like murmurings at that point, right? Like it was just like, oh yeah, dude, this is like this virus going on. It's like, I guess it started in China. It's making its way across Europe. Like it's crazy. Like, oh, well, fingers crossed. And then like
Yeah.
a month
And
later.
meanwhile, it was definitely in the convention center there.
Oh
Like
yeah.
no
Oh
question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
That was the thing I remember the most about that conversation that you and I had, because I think it was like me and you and Frank and Corinne.
Yeah, Kareen. Yeah, she
Corinne,
was
yeah,
there.
she was there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and you were like, dude, I never want to ever hear anyone talk shit about Chad Kroeger from Nickelback ever again. That guy's so chill. He just like bought us beers with like a cool crisp 100. Like he is so rad. And I was just like, oh shit, I got here 5 minutes too late. I get...
Dude, that was like, I mean, I've told this story so many times by now, like including publicly on the website, but I never mind sharing it again because it was such a great moment.
Yeah,
Like, obviously, everybody bags on Nickelback and Chad Kroeger,
right.
and whatever. It's a matter of opinion. It's kind of just become this cultural thing at this point.
Yeah.
It's like not even based on anything. But we're standing in line at the bar. And I don't know, there's three or four people in front of us. So, it's like a significant wait. And we get to the front and we see Chad Crow. He's like standing to the side, kind of side of the bar, just chatting with some people. And like he leans over to the bartender and extends $100 bill and is like, "Hey, is it cool if I give you this and you just give me some beers?" Like that's like literally what he said. Like, "Can I give you this? Like this $100?" Like, okay, dude. And and she was like, yeah, sure, like, okay. And like she got all flushed in the face because obviously it was a huge tip and it's Chad Kroeger. And so she gives over the beers and and just goes about her business. And then she takes our order. Chad's got his beers, and then he's with his friends, and then he leans back over and he's like, "Oh, like, buy these guys round two because I cut them in line." And we were just like, oh. And we were like taking selfies like this, like, without him knowing. And like, and then it just became this thing where like, you were one of the first people to find out, but then the entire rest of the week, whenever we went back to the hotel room, we would just jam Nickelback.
Yeah.
We're like, fuck yeah, Nickelback, baby.
That's fucking amazing. I feel like they get a bad rap, man. They're one of those bands that I
They
feel
write
like,
some good songs.
dude, people always judge them by their singles, and I'm like, you can never judge a band, especially like a mainstream top 40s band, whether it's rock or pop or whatever, by their singles. Like those are oftentimes heavily manufactured for like a very specific purpose, and it's like, man, Nickelback is a solid like hard rock. I don't want to say new metal, but like hard rock, alternative rock, late '90s, early 2000s band, and I will
Yeah.
die on that hill.
I mean, and look, like there's something to be said for even on, Photograph, or what was the other one, Hero,
Yeah.
right? Well, from the Spider-Man, like the less rock tracks, let's
Hmm.
say, like, which are of course the most popular ones. Even on those, there's something to be said for the art of songwriting,
Yeah.
which is not really talked about a lot in metal. Like sometimes, it certainly is in the conversation, but like when I say songwriting, I mean like songwriting,
Yeah.
just really digging in on every note, every transition, just every, like, creating a song for the express purpose of it being catchy.
Yep. Oh
That
yeah.
is not easy.
No,
That is
it
so
really isn't.
fucking hard.
And every time, man, every time I see anyone from like any other genre of music, not even just metal, but like someone be like, yeah, dude, like all that top 40s pop shit, like I could make that kind of thing overnight, like it's just a 4/4 beat, like blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay, like you could, but like would it sell a million copies? Like the answer is probably a hard no.
And also,
Like,
no, you couldn't. You
yeah,
could not do
yeah.
that. It would not sound good.
Yeah, that's
Like, it
that's
just
the other
would
thing.
be, it would be like, it would be horrible.
It would
You
be
think you could do it, but it wouldn't be good.
yeah, until you sit down and really try it. Right before I joined a Legion, I was doing like dance pop band production and all kinds of stuff, and like, man, it's a whole other world of challenges. Like it's a yeah, it's a whole different ball game. But I digress. So for those of you who don't know and who are watching, not from Ben's properties right here on Metal Blade, Ben is, as you may have guessed from the social media tags below these little windows, the brain behind Metal Sucks, co-founder, I do believe. So, how did you get started with Metal Sucks? Like, what made you want to get into the metal news business?
Well, at that time, it wasn't really the news business so much, which is kind of a weird thing to say. And, well, that sort of transitioned over time, and we'll get to that. But basically, the idea was the metal sites that are out there that are doing like news or reviews or, tour announcements, whatever they're doing, are just doing it in a kind of boring way.
Right.
They're just cut and paste press releases, and this was late 2006 when we did me with Matt, the co-founder, who writes under Axel on the site, and the idea was basically, let's do Pitchfork for metal. Like, that was the idea. Like, let's be opinionated, let's be snarky, let's be funny, let's have fun with it. Let's
Right.
do something that's not being done anywhere else in the metal space, online or print. And then at the same time, the idea was kind of like, Matt and I have known each other since we were kindergarten, and, like, grew up making tapes for each other. And, like, our musical history goes as far back as you can possibly go, from like Stand By Me,
Yeah.
um, and, and so the idea was also like, let's take our conversations that we have when we sit on the couch and get stoned and just we're watching the new Lamb of God DVD or whatever, and we're just bullshitting, and let's put those online, because this is how people talk about metal, right? Or just music, like, they don't sit around regurgitating press copy, they have like real conversations, and we thought that people would want to read about metal in the same way that they talk about it. So, like, let's take this kind of like, and, again, with the humorous angle, let's make it kind of like this Beavis and Butthead sort of funny take on it.
Right. Well, I feel like that has definitely stuck throughout the years. Metal Sucks is often, the tongue in cheek, like less just, dry, like you were saying, like dry cut delivered, press site when it comes to stuff like that. Uh, how do you think humor kind of fits into, not only like your guys' mission statement, from the beginning till now, but just kind of metal in general?
Well, I talk about this often, and I think it's important for all of us who are in the metal industry and who are fans of metal to remember that metal is kind of silly. Like, in like when you really like, boil it down,
Yeah.
like no matter how, in fact, the most serious bands are the most funny ones, in my opinion, because they take themselves so seriously,
Yeah.
and certain other genres of music are like that, of course. But like when you really zoom out and look at what metal is from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know anything about it, like especially modern metal with a bunch of dudes screaming and going crazy and just like these super fast BPMs and riffs and drums, and like it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And especially the musicians who take themselves the most seriously and are just like so serious about this thing, so I just think it's important to remember that all of this is not so critically important, which isn't to diminish the art, of course.
Right.
I mean, like, the art is valid and serious and important, but it's important to take a step back and just be like, metal is kind of silly. Like it's a blessing, hashtag blessing, that any of us get to do this for a living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've kind of coined a phrase, especially since my time with Allegiant, because I've been playing metal forever and was releasing records, for a good 4 or 5 years before I was doing Allegiant, but especially since I've joined this band, I've coined a little bit of a phrase that's like, take what you do seriously, not yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just like, it's like you said, the artistry that goes into metal, super important. You know what I mean? Like without that, there's nothing to separate this genre the, from the super serious way that some of the artists like perceive themselves and outwardly present themselves.
Right.
And
And I mean, again, like that's important. Like I when I first started in this career, and I would have to tell, my older relatives or whatever, like explain to them, and they, knowing nothing about metal except like maybe they would say AC/DC or Guns N' Roses or something, and I would be like, well, really, like metal in a lot of ways is like classical music, and in terms of the structure and composition and arrange, and so like there's that element that's very serious and artistically incredibly valid and important, but also it's kind of silly,
yeah,
like it's, I mean, especially when you get into like black metal and,
yeah,
super serious hardcore,
yeah.
there's just like, I mean, like all of it really, it's all
I,
kind of silly.
I try to remind people as often as I possibly can that like the godfathers of black metal were literally a bunch of 14-year-olds.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like it's very
Yeah,
important to remember. It's like every
it
time you
is
see a
that gets lost in the
long-winded,
conversation.
yeah, every time you see a long-winded conversation about like the truest cultist ritual performance, like every time you see one of those, just be like, you know, the people that planted it in your idea that like that's how you should present yourself were like still poppin' zits. Like they were not
Yeah,
exactly,
they were kids.
like absolute like literal children. And that's not to take away from black metal as a genre, because it's obviously come so far since the mid to late 80s when all that kind of stuff was starting over in Norway. But it's just it's like I said, it's important to remember sometimes. Every time I'm just like, God, black metal is so up its own ass. Look at these guys. I'm just like, well, it was a genre started by children, so
That's good. I'm gonna use it. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I keep that in mind, but it's important as a
Yeah.
reminder
Yeah,
sometimes.
for sure. Saying that as someone who, God, I love black metal so much. That's like what it's like what got me into metal, like extreme metal. Like the first bands that I got into that jumped from like, the Metallicas and the System of a Downs were like, Cradle of Filth and like early Opeth, that then moved on into like Emperor and Mayhem, and now there's had evolved into the different forms of black metal like Alcest and those Agalloch albums, and now I'm just vibing on like a Rancy Pazuzu, just being like they're like black metal on acid. It's amazing.
Yeah, those are all bands that I like.
Yeah,
All good bands.
absolutely. Anyway, so how, speaking of black metal and metal genres changing within themselves, from their inception to today, how do you think metal has evolved, I guess, in your time covering it? Like what really substantial changes would you say that you've seen? Because working in the business that you work in, or on the side of the business that you work on, I should say, I feel like your finger's a little bit more on the pulse than many other people that are just kind of like watching from the distance. So what kind of insights do you think that you could say provide us with?
Um, well, I mean, the thing that sticks out to me is that I think metal has gone further underground. There's more of it than ever because just the distribution is instantaneous and the access is immediate now, more so than ever. But like when we started Metal Sucks, metalcore was the big thing, right? And it like blows my mind that metalcore is still a valid subgenre, but it has changed a lot. But metalcore, this was like 2005, maybe even you want to say sort of the tail end of the metalcore boom, right?
Yeah.
And then it was deathcore. That was a pretty big thing that exploded a year or two after that. And then a year or two after that, you had gent really starting to take off with like Periphery and Animals as Leaders and whatever you think of subgenres. Obviously, I'm just grouping bands loosely.
Yeah.
But then after that, like you had like a little bit of a doom resurgence, and you had the like heavy metal, kind of classic metal kind of thing come back. And since kind of like 2010 or so, like it just kind of feels like it's coasting, and like each successive blip of new trend is smaller than the one before it, and to where you've now got just kind of like anything goes sort of, and I mean there are like the most recent one I guess is the old school death metal resurgence, like bands like Gatecreeper, Creeping Death, and like bands in that genre. But and of course like the thrash resurgence also in like 2008 2009. But like where we are now, it's just kind of everything, like there's
Yeah.
not really like a popular scene
Right.
within metal.
I feel like the hardcore scene, like that, like East Coast hardcore, kind of came back.
Like you mean like
Oh,
Knocked Loose kind of
yeah,
bands like
like
that?
bands like Knocked
Yeah.
Loose and Nails. I feel really like gave that a kickstart. I feel like that, kind of came.
Yeah,
Power
that was
Trip,
one.
Power
That's
Trip was
one for
another
sure.
was another huge
Yeah.
one. And I feel like that also, but it's kind of like
But
you
like
said, it's
none
like
of
these
those
things are
bands
like
are
blips that just kind of like,
like, yeah, like none of those bands are on the level of even like Suicide Silence at their peak, or like
right,
Periphery even,
yeah,
like just like none of those. I mean, Power Trip, maybe they would have gotten there, obviously very sad with
yeah,
Riley, and maybe they still will, but certainly it hasn't happened yet with any of those bands where they're headlining, let's say like 1,000 cap rooms
yeah,
even,
yeah, for sure.
so
So kind of a deviation, but on that same note, how do you think that a band like Gojira, for example, has managed to like kind of defy those odds, right? Like, because Gojira plays huge venues. They like do these like big giant, like they did that like Gojira at Red Rocks thing. Like how because there are those like certain, I guess you would call them like legacy acts, but I wouldn't even say Gojira is that, because like what, their first album came out in like 2004, 2005, something like that, with
something around there.
like right around there. Like
Yeah.
how do you think a band like that has managed to like not only stay relevant through all those ups and downs, but like grow into this kind of huge thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the obvious answer is that they don't fit into any subgenre,
Right.
which, like, if, there's any guys and or gals in unsigned bands watching this right now, everyone's gonna be like, yeah, my band doesn't fit into any genre either. Like which usually is a hindrance, but,
Right.
for the occasional band that's phenomenal can really work. And I think Gojira have a sound that's completely their own. um they haven't, like, you can't affiliate them with any subgenre of metal, like
Right.
you just really can't. And I think being an amazing live band for them, you see that band live and you're just blown away, by how
Yeah.
tight and incredible they are.
So fun fact. So I'm a big Gojira fan. Obviously,
Me too.
that's why I referenced them above a lot of other bands that fall into that same kind of set of parameters. But I have never seen them live. I've tried to see them live
Wow.
like at least 5 or 6 times, and there have been like some real close calls. Right, like we played Heavy Montreal in 2018, the day right before them, and then had a day off the next day. But it was just like trying to stay, and it was like, oh god, like we gotta go, like I can't stick around all night and wait for them to play. Or like the same year, like we played 70,000 Tons of Metal in 2017, and they were supposed to play, but then they dropped off like last minute, and it was just like, god damn it. Like, and so I've for years now been trying to catch them, but it's always a weird situation like that, or like I'm on tour at the same time they're on tour or something like that. Like, it's just never lined up. And it's
That
funny,
sucks, man.
dude. It's so funny because it's like I hear people all the time be like, yeah, I'm not really a fan of their records, but like I saw them live and like holy shit, it was amazing. And I'm like, well, I love their records, so like am I just gonna like maybe the universe is protecting me from seeing them live because my head will just explode, just my brains will just come shooting out of my ears. uh
Well, at this point, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah,
After
right,
so
it's been
long,
so-
you're going to be like, that was pretty good.
I know, right?
But yeah, no, I know what you mean. I've seen them a ton of times. The first time actually was in 2006, the year that we started Metal Sucks. Earlier in the year, Matt and I went to the Download Festival in the UK, and that was our first time going to a European festival. So our minds were blown on that level. But we were hanging out in London a few days prior, and we picked up, I think it was a Metal Hammer most likely, and it had like a download preview, and it said like, check out, there's like just a little blurb like, check out this band Gojira. So we're like, okay, like we'll do that. And we saw them, and we've been fans ever since.
Yeah. I think I got into them on The Way of All Flesh. A friend of mine showed me. I think that's the title track, the one that starts off with like the clicky polyrhythm thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he showed me that song, and I was just like, well, this is one of the sickest things I've ever heard. And then got into their back catalog and have been kind of following them ever since.
Yeah,
But
that's my favorite record too.
it's so good. It's so good.
It is, and like sonically, it's just fantastic.
It's
It sounds
dude,
amazing.
it's the production on that record, man. Like every once in a while, you get these records from bands where it's just like the production is just kind of left of center of their usual sound, and for some reason that just is so remarkable and like stands out so much to me across all kinds of different bands. I would even say, and using this as a segue going into our next topic here, Rivers of Nile is kind of one of those bands, right? Like when they released that album that's hanging out right behind you there on that flag, Where the Owls Know My Name, it was just like such a major sonic change and songwriting and everything, and it really like put them on the map as far as being like a serious contender as like a metal headlining band. You manage them and have kind of taken them from being this like basically unknown, kind of just like tech death band to being like one of these premier death metal bands. How did that happen? How did you find out about the band and start working together? What made you want to work for them when you discovered them?
Yeah, well, I linked up with them. I want to say 2011, which is crazy that it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was managing a band called the Binary Code from New Jersey, who maybe some people know. And Jesse from that band, they were doing a headlining show at this place called the Lit Lounge in New York, which had night metal shows every week. And it was for local talent, touring bands. It was this tiny dive